Hi, my name is Matt, and today we're going to do an instrument panel repair on this 96 Ford Ranger. And this is going to apply specifically, of course, to 96 Ford Ranger or Explorer. It's going to also apply to pretty much any Ford vehicle around that time period, plus or minus 4 or 5 years. And also we'll give some tips on replacing instrument panel lights or accessing the instrument panel itself even on pretty much any vehicle. So let's go ahead and get started. So in a previous video, I showed how to do a complete used car inspection, and one of the tips I gave was to go ahead and take your key and turn on the car to on, don't start it, and make sure that you see the check engine light show up and that it goes off when you start the car. Well, the person who bought this car did not do that, and this car does not have the check engine light come on when you turn the car to on. And what happened is when he went in for his emission inspection, they immediately failed it because it does not have an operable check engine light. Incidentally, the code on the check engine light that would have, if the light would have lit up, was a very simple evap code. It was just a leak in the gas tank, a very simple hose replacement, actually, an evap hose replacement in the gas tank. And it seems to me that the previous owner went through more trouble to disable the check engine light on this vehicle than to just do the repair. So always check for that check engine light before you buy a used car. A really good first step is going to be to remove the negative battery cable, because we don't want to cross up any electronics by accident when we remove the instrument panel and create a short circuit. And also, of course, the door is going to be open for a really long time. We don't want the battery to drain from the courtesy light. All right, so the obvious elephant in the room when you're removing an instrument panel is you have to remove all of the bezel components, and the big deal with that is where in the world are the screws that I have to remove to get these components out of here. And a good place to start on this vehicle looks like it's going to be this kick panel right here. It may be different on your vehicle, but the trick is you kind of have to look at it and see what is covering the bezel behind it. Usually when you remove a component, that will reveal the screws that are hidden to then remove the next component. You remove that next component, it reveals hidden screws. So it's kind of done in layers. And the other trick is to always look on the bottom. The screws are usually hidden on the bottom. And if I look on the bottom here, it looks like there's some 8mm screws. So, well, I take it back. They're smaller than that. Probably 7mm. And on this particular model, there are 3 of them along the bottom of the kick panel, so we're going to remove those. Now we're going to want to gently tug and see where it's hanging up at, and I can feel that there is something securing the kick panel at this lever for the hood release. So we're going to take a look under there. There are 2 bolts that are hidden behind the hood release, so I'll have to remove those. This is very status quo when removing a dashboard. They love to hide the screws under levers or removable things like the ashtray, stuff like that. So always make sure if you're stuck somewhere and you can't find where the screws could be, remove any of those components that can be moved or removed, and check for hidden screws. All right, there we go. And there goes our kick panel. We can see in removing the kick panel that there are several bolts here that can be removed to remove this metal portion, but I don't think we're going to need to remove that because it doesn't look like to me that it's interfering in any way with the instrument panel bezel. So we're going to go ahead and leave this in place for now until it looks like we need to remove it if we do. And in looking around the instrument panel for what else may be holding it on, we see that underneath this overhang, there are 3 bolts that are hidden up there. Again, always look underneath things if you want to find the hidden bolts. And we're going to go ahead and have to remove those as well now. And incidentally, so far for all of these, I'm using a 7mm socket. All right, so I'm going to give it a little tug here, and I can see that this black instrument panel facing is fixed to the instrument panel bezel, so it doesn't remove on its own. So it looks like our next step, we're going to have to remove the radio bezel. We can also go ahead and pull off any of these knobs like this, like for the lights, and see if there's any others those just pull right off, and you'll want to get those out of the way so you don't break them. Right, so we're double checking, and as we're looking around, we can see there may be some screws behind this fuse panel actually. And there are, but we can see that the screw here is going to have nothing to do, I think, with this edge here. So as we look around under the instrument panel, we've removed those black screws. We can see that right in this area here, this bezel here is covering our instrument panel bezel. So we will need to remove this bezel. Now usually these just pop right out, so we're going to see if we're lucky and we can just pry this thing right out, and if it's just held in by clips. And actually I take it back, it's not, because I just noticed, again, always looking underneath. If we look under here, see there's one screw, 2 bolts that are holding this in. So had we tried to pry that out without noticing that, we could have cracked it. Okay, I've got those bolts out now. And the next thing I'm going to want to do is, again, remove these knobs here. What I always like to do is to turn the knobs all the way to their leftmost positions so that I can easier align up the knobs when I put them back on. There we go. And now this thing should just pry out. So I'm going to use this tool here and gently undo the clips that hold it on. And we can see that it's coming out pretty easy now, so I don't think there's any more bolts. Again, a lot of models you won't even need to remove bolts at this stage, but on this one we did. Okay, now obviously there are going to be some electrical connections for your radio and things like that here, but if we look, we can see that we won't have to completely remove all of the electrical components from this cluster because we can access whatever we need to behind it. And there is a screw here, and well, look at that. I think there was another one here, maybe or maybe not, but I'm kind of looking for evidence that maybe somebody was in here before that would have shown that they removed the check engine light bulb. But we do have at least one screw there that needs to be removed. All right, and at this point we should be able to walk this thing out of here. Again, we're going very slowly here, seeing if we missed any bolts or screws that are holding anything in. In trying to remove this, I see that it does seem to still be stuck on the bottom somewhere underneath that metal part here that I thought I wouldn't have to remove. So it does look like, after all, we are going to at least have to loosen that up or remove it altogether. Okay, and indeed that is going to be the case. If we look here, I can now pull this down slightly, and we see that there is a hidden screw there and a hidden screw there. So it looks like I'm probably, now that I've got these top bolts loosened up on this metal component, I can probably just reach my ratchet in there without removing this whole thing. All right, and now that thing's pretty much walking itself out. So we have to steer it, no pun intended, around the steering wheel. Like that. And looks like we've got an electrical connection right here for the dimmer. But actually, I think we can just probably leave this in place here. Just make sure it's not hanging too much. And check this out. There's a pried away broken component here for the light switch, which verifies to me that somebody has been in here before. So I am betting that when we remove this panel, we are indeed going to find that the check engine light bulb is missing. I've actually seen that quite a number of times. Seems to me a lot of times it's easier to just fix the problem, but again, maybe they didn't know how to do it, or maybe it was more expensive than a free removal of a light bulb if they tried it themselves. Finally, at this point, we can remove the actual instrument cluster. Now, if we look closely here, there are several of these little tiny screws here. There's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, three along the top, one at each corner, that clearly it looks like you'd have to remove the panel. But in my experience, this is actually going to be to secure the glass onto the panel. What I'm more interested in are these. If we look here, see these white clips and the bolts in front of them. There's going to be one at each corner, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. When we remove all 4 of those, we'll be able to remove the instrument panel and the plastic covering in front of it at the same time. In this application, I'm not worried about removing the plastic covering. That'd be something maybe if you needed to replace a dial or do white face gauges or something like that. Because the bulbs are going to be on the back of the panel, I'm not interested in removing this plastic part. So we're going to go ahead and remove those bolts right there, and those appear to me to be same size as the other ones, 7mm. They are. So once we remove these 4 bolts, we should be done. We'll go ahead and get this one up here. And incidentally, all these bolts do seem to be the same, but a good technique is to use like a little small parts divider tray, or I use a little tackle box tray to keep the bolts separate for each component, so that I can put them back where they came from. And we got the other 2 in the other corners. And now we should be able to just walk this thing out of here. I want to go real slow here. Pay attention to where all the connectors are. And I'm going to just take a quick look at where the connections go, so in case one of them unplugs, I'll know where it goes back. Of course, I can't get enough slack in the cable here to completely remove this thing from the steering wheel. So what I'm going to have to do is actually go ahead and disconnect these connectors. But before I do that, I want to make sure that I reconnect them in the right places. So I'm going to see if they only can go on one way. And to be honest with you, I can't really tell. These connectors look pretty identical. So what I'm going to do is get a piece of tape, and I'm going to put a piece of tape on these connectors to label where they go, so I can make sure I don't cross them up by accident, just in case they are interchangeable. And probably they aren't really interchangeable, but better to be safe. So I'm going to label one top, and that's going to go on this guy for the top connector. And actually the ones on the left and right are different, so I can leave those alone. I'm just worried about this connector and the one below it. They look pretty similar. All right, and by pushing down on the tabs, I can release the connectors. All right, and one final connector here, and we can remove our instrument panel. All right, now on this instrument panel, the check engine light I know is going to be right under the L on the oil pressure, but also generally when you turn them around, you'll see that they actually have labels on what the different bulbs are. I hope you can see it, but we've got things like oil printed right here, and check engine printed right here, and we see that there is a bulb missing there. There's other bulbs over here. We can see we've got airbag, brake, ABS, seatbelt, things like that. Also, there's going to be some other bulbs up here. You can actually just remove any of these bulbs by just unscrewing them. They can be a little bit stubborn. I'm just going to gently pry that loose there, and you can just remove a bulb like that. And as long as I've got this instrument panel out, I'm going to go ahead and check to make sure that all the bulbs are good, and then they just screw right back in, right into the circuit board to complete the connection. Cool. So for this owner of this vehicle, all I've got to do is buy another bulb, put it back in there. We'll have the check engine light working again. And of course, I fixed the original check engine light problem, so he should be able to go back to his emissions and pass with flying colors now. And that is how to remove the instrument panel on a vehicle. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.